Good evening. It's Monday, October 6th, and tonight we will be, we're going to have the Policy Committee meeting this evening, and I'm Linda Stone. I'll be presiding over the meeting, and we'll start with a roll call to my left.
Ed Tate, School.
Michael Roosevelt, School Board.
Ron Spring, Council Rock, HR Director.
Andy Santos, Superintendent.
Ann Horner, School Board.
Tracy Oseki, School Board.
Matthew McCarthy, Tech Integration.
Jutta Pali, School Board.
And before we get into the policies, I just wanted to thank Dr. Sanko and for working with the other members of the Bucks County Legislative Delegation for sending that letter off to Governor Shapiro regarding the state budget and how it's affecting all the schools in the 13 schools in the district, so in Bucks County. So hopefully the letter has some impact, along with I hope other school districts have been also putting a little pressure on to get that budget completed. But thank you for working with the other members of this district. And with that,
Do you want to just say them?
Good evening, sorry to interrupt, could I just also partake in the attendance or roll call?
oh, yes, Nikki Khan,
Nicole Khan,
Okay,
yes,
and-
Nicole Khan, School Board, thank you.
sorry, and also,
Nicole Crawford, Director of Elementary Education.
Good evening, Al Fong, Director of Secondary Education.
thank you. So, Mr. Spring,
Thank you all for being here, both public as well as on those listening at home. This is a reminder that for reliable, accurate, and up-to-date information about our district, please refer to resources, websites, and social media platforms managed by the Council Rock School District. We urge the community to be judicious in choosing where to obtain information and to be aware that there are unauthorized social media accounts using the Council Rock name that post false and misleading information regarding district matters. If you question what you're seeing, need additional details, or a reliable fact check, please contact the district directly. Our contact information is readily available on our website at www.crsd.org. So for today's meeting, we have 9 policies and 1 discussion item set for the agenda. With respect to the policies, we have 2 second reads. 5 second reads. They are the 5 policies that were on for first read at last policy agenda and were approved as a first read at the last board meeting. They're currently up for second read today, and then we have 4 policies that are up for first read. And we'll be getting to them next. And then we have a discussion item for any questions that might be out there with respect to the AR 109 objections to books in the library. So we'll get started right off the bat, and we'll start with our second reads. Some of them just have slight changes, some of them are review. The first one is 228, which is student government. As you may remember, basically the only change with respect to student government is we expanded student government to recognize not just the high school, but all levels. The prior policy just really focused on high school, but as we discussed, there is a student government going all the way back to the elementary level, and we just wanted to make sure that we recognize them and include them in the policy. So again, that's their second read, and that was the change to 228.
sorry,
Ed, there's no other questions?
no comments, questions?
So the next policy, if I move on, is student fundraising. The changes to the 229 student fundraising policy, in the definitions, it's just, clarifying the verbiage and defining what student fundraising is. And it really just clarifies the verbiage in that part of the policy and definition. And it also just clarifies a practice we already have, which allows for the building principal to approve fundraising for school organizations, school clubs, things of that nature. And it's more of a central office function to approve those fundraising events for out-of-school organizations. More global, more district-wide. So the principal really focuses on the school approvals, central office administration, the superintendent focuses more on the global, non-school specific fundraising. And again, this is a second read, primarily clarification changes. So I just wanted to bring that forward again, see if there's any questions.
Anyone have any comments?
I like the simplification.
Thank you.
Mr. Roosevelt?
Yeah, I noticed, just out of curiosity, one of the clarifications is the removal of PTO, PTA, home and school organizations. Is that due to the fact that they're separate legal entities, not part of the school district, or is there some other reason for that?
They are separate, and also what you'll see is a lot of the definitions start taking out specific lists, because once you make a list, there's always things that are not included in the list. So in order to try to clarify and make things more consistent and global, a lot of the policy we've seen, they've kind of in the definition section have removed some of the listing from those areas. It doesn't mean that it doesn't change the manner in which we treat PTOs, PTAs, home and school associations, booster clubs, things of that nature.
Any other questions on? Okay.
The next policy, which is 230, public performances by students, as you see, is just a review. It will be reviewed for the first time. When it says review, that means there's no changes to the policy. We're just looking at it. It's been a while since we looked at it previously. We're putting eyes on it to see if there was a need for any changes. If there's no need for those changes, we just move ahead and review it and make sure that we have that discussion. We did discussed this in depth at the previous meeting, talking about public performances by students. And one of the things that we discussed was not penalizing students who may not be able to attend a performance due to engagement in multiple events. A student may be part of a band, maybe part of a sports team, maybe part of a club, that all may have an event that same day. And to penalize a student for making a choice of one and not attending the other, we felt wasn't fair. And, so that's a particular area that was discussed and remains the same, that we will not be penalizing students for that.
Any questions on this? Okay.
Policy 231, social events and class trips. The only change to that is clarification in the title. And that title talks about district-sponsored social events and class trips. As a district, we can't control non-district sponsored events. And one of the things we talked about, for instance, were some of those travel abroad trips that are run by private companies. A teacher or a school employee may be part of that trip and facilitating that trip. But if it's not a school-sponsored event or school-sponsored trip, this policy doesn't apply to that. That's completely out of our purview. So we wanted to clarify that because there are those multiple facets of trips, whether it's school-sponsored and then there's outside trips. So this talks about just generally participation in those social events and class trips.
Any questions with this?
And the last of the second reads before we go into the new policies is student involvement in decision-making. Again, that is a review policy, and as we talked last meeting, this is really a philosophical statement of policy, talking about the fact that the board and the district truly value student input. And that student input is taken into account, obviously based on maturity level, appropriateness based on age, and so on. Obviously, the inclusion and input of an elementary school student may be different than the input and inclusion of a high school student based on the issue. But it really talks about the importance of bringing students in, having them have those discussions. And like we talked about, I think Dr. Sanko, Mr. Funk do a very good job at making sure that those students are involved. One of the things we even talked about was when we were looking at the electronic device policy, having those meetings with the students at the schools, specifically meeting with students, getting their input with respect to what their views were, and making sure that we heard the students and we took their views into account. So again, there's no change to this policy. It's just we're reviewing it, and it was last reviewed, I believe, in 2018.
Any questions here?
So now we are going to be moving on to our first reads. These are policies that are up for the first time. Some of them have minor changes, some are review, one of them are review, and one is review and some have minor changes, one has a little more substantive change. The first one is the use of bicycles and motor vehicles. That policy is remaining pretty much consistent with what we had. However, as we know, there's been a major uptick in the use of e-vehicles, whether it's e-bikes, e-scooters, a lot of different types of e-vehicles. There are separate state statutes and local statutes that govern e-vehicles, you know, age restrictions, age of 16, things of that nature. So we wanted to make sure that we added that to, specifically to the policy, you know, talking about requiring specific approval by the building principal, you know, just to ensure that we are in compliance, making sure that students are in compliance. I know that both Mr. Funk and Ms. Crawford sent out flyers, multiple flyers. It was in the Rock Report. It was sent out separately by the principals, specifically setting forth what the state and local rules are governing e-vehicles. So we just wanted to make sure that they were included, specifically named in this policy with respect to that. One of the statutes that it does cite specifically, and this encompasses that to a certain degree, talks about the fact that the board can create policy that falls within both state and local law. So anything that we do with respect to e-bikes has to fall under that umbrella of state and local law that has been shared out multiple times with parents, to ensure safety and compliance. So that's the one change we have with the use of bicycles and motor vehicles.
If I could just take this opportunity just to kind of piggyback on what Ronnie said. We've been speaking with local police for quite some time and share the concern about safety with the electronic vehicles, whether it's the scooter or the bike. There's even like a unicycle that's an electronic thing right now. So to folks here in the schools and listening, just try to do your best to keep kids safe with these things. The last day that we had off for I believe it was Yom Kippur, I was going from school to school, and the police had a couple kids pulled over along the sidewalk, and so they're paying attention to it. So, thanks, Ron.
Ms. Pollard?
So does that include electronic vehicles? Like electric cars?
No,
Because it's not very clear to me when I read it.
that would fall under, the motor vehicles would fall under the policies for students driving cars. These are more of the electric ATVs, you know, e-bicycles, e-scooters, things of that nature.
Can we clarify that?
Yeah. one of the things we can do is in that second paragraph under authority, say the board shall permit the use of motor vehicles and electric cars by secondary students in accordance with district administrative regulation. Obviously, that would be,
Okay, I'm okay with that.
The problem is the red, right? It says
Yeah.
e-vehicles. I think that's, I don't know if there's a way, I don't have an idea, but I think that is a problem.
what if one of the options could be e-vehicles, and then in parentheses, other than electric cars as discussed above? The problem is there's multiple types of
Yeah.
electric. I think public comment is after.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Unless we have a way of saying, of including here, policy, this policy is not applying to, licensed student drivers.
But
Something-
it does in the second paragraph.
It does a
So the
third.
policy does apply to licensed drivers with respect to the second paragraph under authority.
Okay,
We can,
Perhaps there's a way to mention what Ms. Stone said and reference the other policy that pertains to secondary student vehicles that would park, instead of defining it, including, excluding it in two different policies. Maybe there's a way to reference the overlap. Not suggesting I know what that is right now, but
well, I think, I'm not sure if there's another policy that references it. I know in the second paragraph under authority, it discusses motor vehicles, like the driving of cars for secondary students. The third paragraph deals with those other areas. So potentially we could say, in the second paragraph, the board shall permit the use of motor vehicles and electric cars by secondary students, et cetera. And then in the third paragraph, the board prohibits the use of skateboards, motorized scooters, mini bikes, motorcycles, e-vehicles, other than electric vehicles as stated above.
and perhaps this
And
is where
other
Mrs. Pally is pointing out the confusion, which I agree with. These different paragraphs, to some degree, seem to be in contrast or disagreement with each other.
Even the title, you know, it says use of bicycles and motor vehicles. You would think this policy is about cars, but it's not about cars.
you know what, unless under authority, we have like a subheading, motor vehicles, and then a subheading, other electric vehicles. I don't know, we might be able to separate, put a subheading so that they're clearly separate.
And the other piece, which I think is a good segue into here, there are, I think, a lot of misunderstandings between parents and their kids on whether this is a street legal thing or whether this is an all-terrain vehicle. And it's also interesting to note that your child, if they do something improper and the police effectively give them a citation, sometimes, in some cases, that citation is duplicated to the parent. So it's important, if you get your kid one of these, that you do some parenting to understand what's allowed and what isn't allowed. So I think there's got to be some way to work this. It doesn't sound like we're disagreeing, but.
Is there, I don't know enough about these to, but my question is, could we reference that this policy is not regarding street legal vehicles? Like maybe there's a exclusion, like this is about bikes and scooters and things like that wouldn't be on the street, but then maybe some of them can be on the street, so I don't know.
Right. Yeah,
I think we need more clarification.
we're close, but I think, yeah.
Maybe we can see what some other districts are, if they have a similar policy. I have a kind of unrelated question while we talk about this. Does every school have a bike rack?
Yes.
Every school has a bike rack. And so if you come with something like this, you cannot hook it up to the bike rack for safety at school. That's not allowed, because you're not allowed to drive it or take it on the school property. Like, I know, I've seen kids on these bikes, but I'm just trying to understand, are they allowed to lock it, or are they not allowed to lock it?
If they have it, they should be able to lock it.
But the bike racks are on the school property, and they can't take it on the school property in
But
theory.
not all, but some are street legal, some aren't. So those that they can, e-bikes that they're permitted to ride, they are permitted to bring on the school property, is my understanding.
They are, even on like the sidewalks and on the back.
They
Yes.
have permission.
If it's street legal.
During school hours? I'm sorry, I should.
To and from,
To and from, yeah.
not during the school day, but to and from.
I'm happy to get more information. I can tell you some districts don't address bicycles at all. They just keep it a pure policy dealing with the cars. And some have a combination of both. But I can go take a look at what other districts have if you want, and we can talk, bring it back.
Yes, Mr. Roosevelt.
A lot of police departments have fairly organized and discernible little flyers that they post in their lobbies that talk exactly about this issue, and I imagine they're consistent. Maybe that might help clarifying these and delineating these.
We've sent that out. They developed one at Newtown Township that we're using across Council Rock.
Yeah,
We've sent that out several times and used it on this, but we can certainly go back and take another look at it.
yeah, because there's something in there about if it's marked ATV, it's not allowed to be on streets or on sidewalks. It's supposed to specifically be off-road. And that was one of the delineators. I think that, it's just from my recollection. And the ones that are street legal typically have mirrors, signaling, that sort of stuff. So that might help.
Is there something in the school handbooks about this too? I would think that this is also addressed on a school by school.
We discussed that
basis.
this year. We added it to the student handbook.
So that might be something for our next meeting, if you can bring that too, just so we can.
And again,
make sure we're
that
consistent.
is all in large part due to the collaboration with the police departments. And as Ronnie said, there are different statutes covering different types of vehicles, to Mrs. Powell's point.
Could we maybe have sub-headlines for, different
We'll go back
levels
and
of
rework the
school?
Yeah,
whole
can-
thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that might help.
I didn't realize that elementary school, they have, elementary students are granted permission for to ride bicycle to school. But that's the only restriction. And then motor vehicles, though, secondary students they have to get permits, right? The motor vehicle.
Well, if it's a car and they're of the age that they can get a parking permit, they need a permit. And I think that's where the question began, if it's an electric car, where does that fall?
We don't have any charging stations at any of the schools, do we?
We do not have official charging stations.
Okay, so we'll take this back to the
Table
drawing
it
board.
and- Yep. The next policy is policy 224, which is care of school property. We're not looking for any changes to this. This is just a review. This talks about, basically it's the responsibility of students to ensure that, they take care and are responsible for school property. We may report, if a student purposely damages school property. And it really just talks about overall, requirement to file vandalism report, submitting reports of incident vandalism, and to the police, and students and others who deface school property may be prosecuted and punished, and may be required to make restitution. So it's really just a general policy that, we utilize in case of cases of vandalism or, defacing school property by students.
Mr. Tate, a question?
Mr. Spring, is there a policy specifically that speaks to equipment, particularly electronic, Chromebooks, that sort of thing, requiring, reimbursement for damaged equipment, that sort of thing?
There's not a specific policy for that. I would refer to.
No, there's, 815 is an appropriate use policy, but for damages of a school district device, if it's wear and tear, that really is on the district. If it's something that is done outside of wear and tear, we work with the building principals and the parents to recoup that money.
And that works just fine without a specific policy?
Most of the time. Most of the time. Sometimes there's been debate whether it was done with intent or it was more than wear or tear, or if it was a genuine accident.
Well, if you feel the need, just bring us a policy, but
Yeah, and on that, if you recall, a couple of years ago, we tried to introduce insurance for that.
I remember.
Families. I don't remember, I think we had less than 60 families that participated in trying to get the insurance at $50 or $75 a year. And then, yeah, so if we think we need that, we're certainly bringing that back.
thank you.
Mr. Roosevelt?
I think I might have been one of the 60 to 70 families, but that aside, I don't see any problems right now with this. I do have one curiosity. There's a bolded paragraph right above the headline, delegation of responsibility, that talks about serious or chronic in nature. I don't know if we should be, or if we could be a little bit more specific to define what chronic is. Is chronic 3 times or more? Is it 6 times or more? Is it twice? How do we define chronic? Like I said, I don't know if we should and if we could, but just a thought to put around the table. But the other way to bookend this is what percentage of our population may be in this category of more than once. We don't have a lot of these incidences.
No, we have good kids, people aren't going around and
Right.
destroying things.
Yeah, so that's to my point. I don't necessarily know if we should.
Ms. Oseki?
This would be the policy that we have used in the past, like when we've had kids on the roof or, swastikas in the bathroom, things like that, that all would come under this policy, right?
And that's just from, that's our policy, but if it reaches a criminal level, then there's restitution and stuff that law enforcement deals with, but for us and what we do as a district, this is what we would.
So I guess my question is because we do deal with some of that stuff, I agree, we have good kids and hopefully it's rare, but is it working when we do have those instances?
It is.
Is it strict enough? Is it?
And unfortunately, we do see it once in a while, and our schools work directly with the families, they work with our security, and the families by and large are supportive when something like this happens. Unfortunately, it's not too often.
Any other questions? Moving on.
So the next policy is the policy 226, which deals with student searches. If you look, there's primarily one change, and I want to take a few minutes to explain it. It would be on the 1, 2, fourth page, which is the back of the second page, where it talks about searches involving removal of clothing or examination of clothing. I want to preface this by saying that's not something we do, but there are legal requirements that govern that. Talking to Dr. Sanko, if it's something of that nature, at that point, we're calling in the police. But generally, student searches are governed under the case law New Jersey versus TLO. And what that does is that sets the standard across the board, which really sets the difference between searches by school administrators versus the police. We know, from just our experience under the police officer, the law enforcement needs probable cause to search someone. Under the TLO case, which is a Supreme Court case, the standard for school administrators is reasonable suspicion. That standard is higher when it comes to more invasive searches, like basically bodily searches. And the way it's couched is, basically, if a student's forced to remove clothing or anything of that nature. And again, I want to emphasize, hearing from Dr. Sanko, that's not something that we do in this district. But there are legal parameters that need to be laid out when you're talking about the policy and the law. Initially, there's a Third Circuit case that governs this, and I did run it by the solicitor as well, just to make sure that it was accurate. And the Third Circuit case is Safford Unified School District, number 1 versus Reading. And I apologize, it's not a Third Circuit, it's a US Supreme Court case. So this is the law that governs the entire country. And they set forth a two prongs that and each four needs to be met to qualify for this search. In our policy, we had it that you needed to meet both those prongs. That's not correct under the law. The law is you have to meet one of the two prongs for it to be a valid search. And this, again, I'm emphasizing this is just the law as set forth by the Supreme Court to be accurate in our policy, not something that we do. I know it's obviously it's a major thing, and again, at this point, we would probably be calling in the police. But the two prongs are basically set forth by the Supreme Court is you have to have a reasonable suspicion that either, one second, I want to make sure I get the exact wording, that the item poses an extremely high level of danger to a number of students. So, example, a firearm, something of that nature. Or that it can't just be a reasonable suspicion that the student has the item on them. It has to be a reasonable suspicion that the student is in possession of the item and that they are concealing it in an undergarment. So you can't just say, oh, I heard that this person has marijuana on them. It has to be reasonable suspicion that they have it and they're concealing it in their undergarments. That being said, it's just really a clarification. And I don't know if it was a misstatement of the law that we had in here. We had the and. It's really either or. But again, I want to emphasize, we're just clarifying what the law is as set forth by the US Supreme Court, not something that, as far as I understand, Dr. Sanko, something we've ever done, nor something that we would ever intend to do. Again, if it rises to that level, the police would likely be called in at that point.
Mr. Roosevelt?
Quickly, if the items are rising to this nature, such as being a firearm, a weapon, or
That's just an
drug.
example I'm using, just so you know.
I get it. And in those cases, which we haven't had, thankfully, police or law enforcement would be involved. Shouldn't we stipulate that in here regarding the second to last paragraph? Where you're talking about staff persons? Wouldn't it make sense to include a law enforcement?
Law enforcement, though, are governed by a different standard.
Yeah?
So this wouldn't affect law enforcement.
I thought you said it did. or it would?
We would bring them in at that point, but they aren't governed by this standard. They're governed by the probable cause.
Right.
Once the police are in, they can always get involved once assuming there's probable cause.
Okay.
So this really just kind of delineates the legal parameters of school searches.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are uncomfortable with this, just thinking about the scenario where this would happen. It's not something that we want to occur.
Of course.
But at the same point, we also recognize, perhaps, or I should say, I recognize, the need for something like this in that situation so that the district isn't fumbling with police. I still want to understand how that works, because if we're saying on the one hand, we're likely involving law enforcement, but then we're not mentioning law enforcement, I don't know if that's similar confusion. I think that parents are going to be upset if they find out their kid comes home and said, I was taken into a room and, you know, my clothes were searched. Like you said, we haven't had this, right? But I imagine parents are going to be upset. Be more upset when police come involved. But I imagine other parents, knowing if this turned out to be true, would be happy. So this is a delicate subject.
It is delicate, and as Ronnie explained the law, that we discussed this. We have SROs in each of our secondary schools, so we have police right on site. And if we ever had that suspicion or whatever, we would involve the police immediately. This isn't, as Ronnie said, something we would have ever done or would ever do.
Yeah.
For exactly what you said, the sensitivity of it, it makes everyone uncomfortable.
Mr. Tate?
I can imagine, in a rare circumstance, when there's not an SRO in the school at that moment, it might be decided by the administration that it is warranted to do. My term is first level search, as opposed to one that's really intrusive. So, I mean, I think it's smart to have this policy in place as needed, but it's something that very, very rarely happens. Is that correct? Do you recall it happening in the past, Dr. Sanko?
No.
But we need the policy in place to protect students, and protect staff, protect safety, and also for liability purposes. So I think it makes sense.
And I just want to clarify, it's something that's been in this policy.
Yes.
It just, the verbiage wasn't legally on point, so it just.
And versus or.
Yeah,
Pardon me?
the and versus or.
Right, I saw that, yes.
Legally.
There's also the caveat here that any of these searches would not be conducted until the district solicitor was contacted. So you have another level of the review.
Correct.
Did you have a question, Ms. Oseki?
I was just going to comment. Ms. Holly can go first.
Ms. Holly?
So to do a bodily search on a child, even if it's the police, don't they need the parents' authorization? I mean, these are children we're talking about. These are not adults. And can even, like a police officer who is in the school, they can go and do like a bodily search on a child? Under what conditions?
I think that, as Ronnie said, it has to be something that could cause serious bodily harm to many students. So, for example, unfortunately, sometimes kids make a mistake and they bring a vape to school. That is not something that's going to cause seriously bodily harm. If there was suspect or suspicion of a weapon, then we would involve the police and the parent and the solicitor and figure out the best way to go about it. But as a school district, I don't think we have any right or reason to be doing a search like that on any student without the police being involved. Because the burden of proof for the police is higher than ours, and we would have to defer to them.
Mrs. Secchi?
So it, like everyone else, I assume, this makes me uncomfortable. I know we spoke about it at length in our pre-meeting. I see the need for a policy like that, and at the same time, like Ms. Pally said, it's like, these are kids and their parents should ideally be there and be very involved. I wonder if where we talk about, at least, so this is like the bottom of, I guess, the back of the second page, where it talks about at least one other staff person of the same gender present as a witness in a location assuring privacy from observation by persons not involved in the search or opposite sex. We talked in the pre-meeting about whether or not we should include police officers there. I think that because their standard was different, we didn't want to be held to, in case of an emergency, we don't want to say we have to wait for the police because remind me of that
Well,
conversation.
I think once the police are there, the police are there. Once the police are there, it's in the police's hands and they're governed by their regulations, probable cause or whatever the other police regulations are. We can't say, as a school district, we want to use our standard, which is less than the police, but the police are there, right? So once the police are there, the police are there. So if they're there watching this policy no longer exists. If the police are there, it falls under their province, it falls under their standard of proof, which is probable cause.
Are we legally required to have this policy?
That I don't know, I'd have to find out. I do think it's probably important to have search policy in general, that lays out the law. And again, policy or not, it's US Supreme Court law. So, we're governed by it, whether we have it in a policy or not. That is, the law is, it's not one of those where we have discretion. It's, regular searches are governed by TLO, and these searches, even if we never use it, are governed by the Sacrofield case.
Mr. Tate?
You're done. Let's talk about a hypothetical, just to see if this helps eliminate the possibilities. If, say, you're in an elementary school and student A tells the teacher that student B has a vape in their backpack. So it's not something that's dangerous to other students, but you want to know if that student has the vape in the backpack. If it was a police officer, there are all sorts of constraints as to the ability to search that backpack. But on the other hand, a teacher or principal, probably more likely, could say to student B, is there something in your backpack you want to tell me about? May I look in your backpack? Does that happen?
That does happen. That does happen. And that happens at the school level and not law enforcement level. And that could happen at any elementary, middle, or high school level. If we hear rumors of that, something in a backpack, something in a locker, or we have evidence, there's reasonable belief that it's there, that's exactly how we operate now.
And this policy gives some specifics and parameters about how that search should be conducted. So my point is, I think that is perhaps an example of why we need this policy. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Al, you want to give an example of high school level, and maybe Nicole?
I guess at the high school level, for example, if hall monitor or security guard during one of the regular sweeps, went into the restroom and had a smell of contraband or some illegal substance. And there was only one student who happened to be in the restroom. That situation that might warrant a search. But again, the administrator would conduct the search. So the security guard at home monitor would take that student to the grade level principal's office. And again, it would unfold much the way you described. It would try to be not intrusive. May I take a look at your book bag? Would you mind emptying? If you see, when you can almost see the outline of the page device, you might say, would you mind emptying the pockets for me? So those type of things take place, generally speaking. But you know, do body searches or anything of that nature. You know, and I would say, you know, in terms of the search being robust, if you're dealing with a more severe threat, if you were talking about a weapon or something, then it might be a more robust kind of search. But if that's not necessarily physically robust, that's more like, hey, you really need to, you know, maybe check out the student's locker in that case, which we often do.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Roosevelt?
Yeah, listening to all of this, it makes me wonder if we need a section to talk about, or maybe we don't, I'm not sure, I'm just sort of speaking about this, about when the district would contact law enforcement, referring specifically to what you said, Mr. Spring, about, well, when the police are here, the policy's over and it's into the police hands. And to Ms. Oseki's point on I guess the second page, not the back of the first page, there's a sentence here, coordination with law enforcement officials. And those words weren't in the part that we first started talking about. Removing so the first part is I guess this is page 3, right? Right above searches on consent, that second paragraph, random or general searches, and it continues, consultation with the district solicitor, coordination with law enforcement officials will be accomplished as provided in the memorandum applicable to the law enforcement agency. So in this paragraph, we're referencing coordination with law enforcement officials, but the first section we started talking about, which is the second to last page, titled Searches Involving Removing of Clothing or Examination Beneath Clothing, doesn't have the reference of coordination with law enforcement officials. So there is a lot to this policy, and there's a lot to consider, and thankfully we don't have many instances to rely on to discuss this, but we don't, I'm assuming this board doesn't want to produce a policy that's confusing, in the same way as with the e-bikes. So I don't know if there's some way that we can clean that up and have a section that talks about when district administration would contact, what are the circumstances where administration would contact law enforcement, if that's the delineation between this policy existing or not. At the same point, I recognize that there could be, to Mr. Spring's point, a situation where you do have a serious health concern, such as a weapon or a large quantity of contraband, that you don't want to get hung up on perhaps too much, contacting everybody to make sure that the student that has it is safe and that the individuals around are safe. So, to Mr. Tate's point, thinking about the hypotheticals is exactly where my head's been going for a while, and it's difficult, well, thankfully, it's difficult that we don't have examples in recent memory, or any memory. Dr. Sanko, you've been here for over 35 years, right? And we don't have this, but this policy has existed for a while. So having an opportunity to go through it, could we add that section to add clarity? support offering this out here to the rest of the board.
And I do want to just mention, and standpoint, we do have the weapons policy. We're going to be talking about the illegal substance policy next, and those provisions those policies do talk about notifying law enforcement and having law enforcement fall within those parameters.
I know this is one that I'll probably read several times over several days just to digest it.
Well,
Again, this is just for first read.
Yeah.
This is my first submission.
and again, the reason, the major change that you were making is that it was legally incorrect the way it was written here with the inclusion of those two parameters, which was supposed to be treated separately, not and, right? And the policy has been in place, so it will stay in place as is unless we make changes or choose to totally eliminate it. I think we're in agreement that we do need to have a policy to discuss how we can handle searches of personal belongings and what things are considered personal, what's school property, and when we can make searches. I think the only question is regarding the section on removal of clothing, right?
Physical search.
So, well, it's removing of undergarments, because we can certainly, take off your coat and your shoes, whatever. That's acceptable. So we can go back and look at, and see if there's ways to clarify that, and to put specific examples, as Ronnie has explained, or we looked at before. Every time you start putting a list, you end up excluding something, and you never know what circumstance will arise. And so we kind of have to have the ability to leave it somewhat open-ended. But I certainly think we can review that section and see if it needs to be tailored in any way. But it's clearly a necessary policy and seems to cover all the angles. Yes?
Yeah, just another thought on searches involving removing of clothing or examination beneath clothing. I'm comforted that the administration has indicated that parents would be involved in this. I would definitely, I do want to see language in there, because hypothetically, if my kid, and I imagine a lot of parents would feel the same way, is in school and their undergarments or removing of clothing was going to take place, I want to know that before it happens. And I imagine you've never had the situation, but that's the way you'd operate. This is, I think, what was intimated early in the conversation. So I'd like to see language perhaps to that.
So I can, if the board deems, I can send kind of add, parents will be notified to that paragraph, send it to the solicitor, make sure solicitor's okay with that.
Do we not want to add about the police being there, or is that, I mean, I would be more comfortable with it.
I don't, I guess my concern, and I understand what you're saying, I can ask the solicitor, but my concern is once the police is there, this policy's moot. Because it now, the standards just now goes to the police standard.
They'll do what they are allowed to do.
It takes over the policy.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Yeah, sorry, I'm late, but I've been listening. So, the policy, I think the policy is good to have. We're talking something that has to do with the Supreme Court ruling. It would be good to understand that case, for all of us to have an understanding of where this came from. I think, as it stands now, our school district uses discretion to not implement this policy, but there may be a reason why the policy in a life-threatening situation would be critical. And gosh, we hope we never have to, but that's the reason why it's here. It's not like we're just, for lack of a better term, strip searching kids. This would be something to do with safety. The Supreme Court's talking about mass casualty type things. So I think the policy's probably where it needs to be. I thought, like you said too, document what we've been doing on a discretionary standpoint, but that could get in the way if it is a situation where we need to act fast. And that's why we have the administrations to trust their judgment in situations like this. So I think understanding why, how the Supreme Court ruled, and all of us to know that, then we could make a better, decision. But we're literally just switching and to or, right? That's the only thing we're changing. And, but I understand everybody's concerns, but, there's a reason why it's there.
Okay, thank you. So, Ronnie, we'll just look again at that one section and see if there's any clarifications or modifications that can be or not made, and then we'll bring it back again.
And add the parents will be informed part.
Yep, I'll reach out to the solicitor, make sure that the notification for parents is okay, I'll add that, and then I just want to confirm we're good to move this ahead then for first read. That means it'll still come back again, we'll still have the opportunity to discuss it further at second read. Is that correct?
So I agree that the parents definitely have to be involved and informed, unless there's an imminent danger that I cannot think of right now. So if there's something that, if someone's hiding like a weapon, you don't have to wait for the parent to show up at the school. But I don't know what's the right way to put that language in there that, will protect the privacy of the child and also the rest of them. It's very tricky, but if you can figure out a way to say,
Well, every effort will be made to contact parents before any action is taken. But that doesn't preclude that you would not move forward.
I was
Depending on the
add,
circumstances.
notification of the parents is one thing, but
You can't stop.
waiting for them to come, that might not be feasible.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. And the last policy is policy 227. This policy was recently amended in 2023. So really, there's very few substantive changes, and the only reason we really brought it back is for one particular clarification. But in 2023, that's when it was amended in light of some changes to the actual penalties for possession that are set forth in the policy. The only substantive changes that we're discussing here is, one is, if you look at off-campus activity, we spent a lot of time talking about off-campus activity when we were talking about the student discipline, policy. When can a school discipline a student for something that happened off-campus? And recently, the courts and the law kind of clarified that. And we made those changes to the discipline policy. Just to keep it consistent, what we're doing here is on where it says off-campus activity, we're just taking out the old verbiage and saying to the extent it's defining it to the extent provided in board policy on student discipline. So now it's referring to the language in student discipline, which we just changed to comply with what the law is. And it takes out the verbiage that has changed over time. So that's really the one substantive change. The only other addition is something that we do anyway, and we're just putting it in here for clarification, and that's basically saying that we can't force a student to be admitted to a program that seeks to identify or rehabilitate for substance abuse without the consent, the intelligent and voluntary consent of the student and the parents. That's something that happens now anyway. You do need parents to consent. You can't just force someone in. But we're just laying it out so it's clear in the policy that it does require that student and parental consent to do that. So other than that, again, it's just slight verbiage changes. Some of the changes that we've seen is, changing local police department to law enforcement agencies. things of that, so keeping it consistent within all of the verbiage changes. But substance is consistent with what was done in the March 2023 changes.
Any other questions, Ms. Polly?
Yeah, so if I understand correctly, so now it applies at what happens off school?
It always did. It always did. So if you see that the language, it says off-campus, and it said the following is off-campus activity, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We just are taking out the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because that language was clarified in the student discipline policy. So we're just saying, we're taking that out, and we're just saying, we're using the same verbiage in that student discipline policy.
I thought it applied when the student was at a function that was organized by the school, or it was on her way to school, or.
Right.
But now this applies to anything off campus.
Well, it always applied as well if it created a disturbance, a significant disturbance within the school. So it always applied to, like you said, extracurricular, things that are connected to school, if there's a nexus like sporting events, things of that nature, or things that happen outside that now are affecting what's going on in school. And again, that's no different it's no different than when, when we talk about fights, when we talk about, other types of disciplinary actions that happen outside of school. They're all treated the same way. And this is just making sure that it's consistent across all the policies. So there's no difference in how paraphernalia is treated outside of school than when we talked about, fighting outside of school or anything of that nature. If someone is smoking, taking an illegal drug on a Saturday night, and it has no bearing on the school can't discipline that student for that.
I thought
But it-
how it can.
No.
But if it's at the school dance, a school sanctioned event, if somebody has alcohol or drugs at a school event, they still get school consequences.
So this isn't saying that for any off-campus activity, you can punish them. It's only the off-campus activity that falls under the requirements that any other type of discipline would fall.
I mean, I understood that in the previous policy, but the way this one is written, to me, it applies. Wow.
So it would be for off-campus, and maybe we can work on looking at the verbiage, but it says right now, the policy shall also apply to student conduct that occurs off-school property or during non-school hours to the same extent as provided in the board policy on student discipline. So this would fall under any other student discipline.
So we have to go to the student discipline policy to understand the specifics.
Yes.
So if someone brought alcohol to school, there's a consequence under this policy. If they were at the homecoming dance and they brought alcohol, that's an off-campus event, but it's school sanctioned, so the same consequence would apply, even though it's on a Saturday night or a Friday night and outside of our campus, they would still have the same consequence.
And is it the same in cases of, say, abuse? That if something happens, like bullying or abuse, and it's on Saturday night, it's off school, then how are we involved? Does the discipline apply? Do we go after?
If it affects the functioning at school, if it comes back to school and.
I'm not sure if I understand that correctly, because if there is abuse, of course it's going to affect everything.
Yes, and then.
But then I have heard situations where you say, oh, it happened off school grounds, so it's not our.
So under the discipline policy, if there's a fight in school, there's a consequence. if there is a school-sanctioned event, 8th grade goes to Dorney Park, and there's a fight at Dorney Park, there are still school consequences. Dorney Park is not Council Rock property, but it was a Council Rock sponsored event, so the school consequences would still apply.
So one of the things we talked about, for instance, when we were talking about vandalism, well, if a group of kids in school got together and created a whole plan to vandalize the principal's car, but did it outside after school, the fact that there was a nexus to the school when they developed the plan, they came up with what they were going to do, even though the vandalism occurred outside of school, they could be punished because it was a direct nexus and had an effect on what happened in the school.
And what if they vandalize a car that is not the principal's? They just got together, they went to the mall, they decided to go after somebody's car, but they're all Council Rock students. Where do we stand?
If it's a school event,
It's not a school event.
then it's a police matter.
Yeah.
So if a bunch of kids decide that they're going to go to Target, and they're all Council Rock students, or they're gonna go to the shore, I don't know, Barnegat, and vandalize a car, that's not a school event, that is a police matter alone. But if it's a school-sponsored event at Target, and they vandalize a car, they're gonna have the law enforcement consequences as well as the school consequences.
Any other questions?
I did spot,
Mr. Tate?
I did spot the removal of, what is it, look-alike or over-the-counter. Let me see if I can find that.
Twice.
I'm looking.
Bottom of the first page.
I see it on the second page, or the pages aren't numbered, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Back page 4.
The blue copy?
So the back of the second page.
Yeah, in all cases involving students in controlled, it had, or look-alike or over-the-counter substances. I guess that had to be removed for a good reason, I suppose.
Yeah, so I think it,
Okay, so button.
right, because it defines, in the definition, it defines controlled substances. So we wanted to make sure that, so I believe that it's to make sure that it aligns with the definition that's set forth in the beginning, because, because it specifically said, it's almost redundant, because when we say controlled substance, if you look at paragraph 8, it talks about not over-the-counter medication.
It does, yeah, I see, number 8, okay. Thank you.
Quick hypothetical. It's on, Mr. Tate was talking about look-alike drugs. And in here, the words designed or represented are used. Hypothetically, if student A knows that tomorrow is pizza day and decides to bring in condiments that are often used on pizza, and student B observes these substances coming out in a cellophane bag and being sprinkled on the pizza or some other food of their choice or that's being served. And student B believes that this is a controlled substance. Would this be considered a look-alike? Or would student A have to share it with student B and indicate that this is something that's controlled?
Well, that would go back to the previous policy about searching. We would, obviously, a lot of work would have to be done to find out who knew what and when. And that would be a perfect example of when a cafeteria monitor or hall monitor and administrator would then conduct a search. Can you empty your school bag? What did you sprinkle on the pizza? And then from there, it would drive us to whether student A and B both knew it, whether A knew it at all, whether B knew it at all. So,
And based upon that, then the consequences would apply or wouldn't.
correct.
That was the other extent, I've seen where students bring in regular gummy bears and sold them for $50 a piece, claiming that they were actual gummy bears that had drugs in them. And when they were caught and police were involved and took it, they tested it, and he was selling regular gummy bears for $50 a piece. So, that's what when they're talking about look-alike.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I do, Ms. Stone, if you don't mind, I asked Mr. Funk, I know we've provided information to the board since, about the change in this policy 227 since 2023.
Yes.
We've been tracking infractions and policy violations, and I asked Mr. Funk to share with the board where we were prior to the 2023 modification. And that previous policy was a 45-day consequence on the first offense, and then, of course, the second offense is a year exclusion. Under the current policy, a two-time offender for a controlled substance or alcohol is a year expulsion, and now the first offense is 10-day. So, Al, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so we had a lot of conversation leading up to that, pretty substantial change in policy number 227 regarding first infraction and the duration of the consequence. And we found that, we did a lot of statistics and kind of checking with other districts, and we were pretty much an outlier in terms of the first offense resulting in a 45-day exclusion. So that was reduced to the 10-day out-of-school suspension, as Dr. Sanko mentioned. For a second offense, it is still a 1-year expulsion for the second offense. There was some conversation and concern, actually, so I think that if we do reduce the penalty, so to speak, are we going to see a spike in the numbers? And I've met with the board, I think, every year, and we have not seen that, thankfully. So the numbers remain fairly consistent going back. 2018, 2019, we had 22 policy 227 infractions, 21, 22, we had 25. The year that we made the change and implemented that, July 1st, 2023, for the 23-24 academic year, we had actually a reduction to 22 infractions. Last year, we had 26 infractions, so the infractions remain relatively the same. We wish we had 0, of course, but in terms of the policy and that change, it doesn't seem to have a negative impact.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And the last item we have for discussion is our AR 109. I was the board had asked to put it on the agenda for discussion. I know it's something that has been talked about previously, has been reviewed previously. So this specifically deals with challenging resource or materials that are in the library. I just I wasn't sure how we want to proceed, if we just have specific questions on the AR. We do have Ms. Crawford and Mr. Funk here because they deal with it from particularly, so they could speak more to it and respond to any questions that the board may have.
Well, just in general, the AR 109, it defines how books are brought into our libraries and who recommends them, where the recommendations come from, how they're reviewed and determined if they're age appropriate. And then we have a process for parents to complain if they don't like the books, or they have the ability to restrict their child from obtaining copies of certain materials in the library. And it's pretty extensive description But it would be helpful, I guess, if you wanted to go through that in a little more detail, and so there's a better understanding by the public on how they could proceed if they have problems or questions.
Nicole, now, giving an overview.
Yeah, it's exactly as Mrs. Stone said, the Administrative Regulation 109 has several components. There's a library selection procedure, which is 109R5. I think the topic in question is 109R6, and that deals with reconsideration or objection to certain materials. So basically, the first part of the process outlines parents contacting the building level principal and the librarian in that particular school to discuss the matter and share the concerns in the meeting. The librarian will offer different, potential alternatives. For example, we utilize the Destiny library computer software system. So a parent may opt to say, I want to make sure that it's noted in Destiny that my child is not to take out X, Y, and Z materials and things of that nature. If there is no resolve at the building level, that's when it would come to the district level. That's steps 3 and 4. And essentially, we create this isn't a one-person decision. There is a district reconsideration team made of several members and kind of has some designated positions. Actually, this administrative regulation was put into effect in April of 2022, prior to myself and Mrs. Crawford being in this role. So it actually needs assistant superintendent as one of the committee members. That has been replaced by the director. If it was an elementary book that was being challenged, Mrs. Crawford would be involved in that committee. If it's a secondary book, I would be involved in that committee, along with several other staff members, a community member, and if it is appropriate, and generally speaking, this would only be at the secondary level, there might also be a member of the student executive for the student on that reconsideration committee. So the committee members are charged with reading the book in its entirety, and then there is a meeting set to discuss the book and whether or not the committee feels as though that book is appropriate for circulation in the library. And then the committee renders a decision, and that decision is sent forth to the superintendent. So that essentially is the process regarding book challenges.
Thank you. I mean, also, parents should know, and as well as students, that if you were to look at a 109R5, it talks about what the criteria are for selecting books, and there are 24 sources of groups that are utilized to support the selection of library materials, and it includes as well suggestions by students and parents. So you can also make suggestions for materials to be included in the library, and then they will again be reviewed through the internal review process. So anyone else here have any other questions? Yes, Mr. Roosevelt?
I know Mr. Hickey wanted to be here and was interested in having this discussed. I did get an opportunity to speak to him before the meeting, and these ARs, AR 109R5, which we don't have in front of us, regarding selection of material, along with 109R6, which we do have in front of us, which is how do you challenge effectively a library procedure. I expect outline a lot of his thoughts, but I'll let him, as this is a discussion item, detail any more specifics after reviewing this. I do have a question. In AR 109R5, is the board included in the selection process of library books?
To my knowledge, well, I would I'll let the experts answer that. I do not believe that we're involved in selection. You want to take that?
I mean, we have to vote.
On library books, we
No,
don't,
but I mean,
we don't choose what books are going to the library.
We're not part of the committee
Do we vote on library books also? In my 4 years, I don't believe the board has voted
it's
on
thousands.
library.
On curriculum,
Textbook.
on textbooks and curriculum books, but not library books.
Right, okay.
But the selection, the sources, because, by the way, and thank you, Dr. Sanko, but on September 17th, he emailed a copy of the 109R5 to all the board members for review. And the sources are Follett top list, PAYRCA book list, Reading Olympics list, ALA, PSLA, recommendations, school library journal recommendations, book lists, publishers' weeklies, different databases, national book awards, professional associations, book lists, webinars and book talks, junior library guild, library staff recommendations, student recommendations, newspapers of national circulation, online book reviews, bookseller reviews, reading books, book trailers. So there's a huge source that the librarians use to make recommendations for libraries. Yes, Ms. Crawford?
Mr. I just wanted to point out that anytime there's a parent that may have a question or concern about any particular title that's in our library or anything related to a book selection, our librarians and our principals, those folks at the voting level, do a great job working with parents, answering the questions, and we've had very few issues at the elementary level related to that. So I think that's important. As Mr. Funk shared, through the Destiny system, parents are able to get a sense of what the children are taking out, and we can make notes in the system ourselves if parents have specific feedback related to the types of books that they want their children to be reading. Usually it comes up more with our primary students. They just want to make sure that the librarian or the library assistant is helping to guide to more age-appropriate books that have over their heads.
Thank you.
And if I could just add for public and anyone listening, the ARs can all be found on our website. If you go to our CRSD website, under the board tab on top where it says board, if you click on that, there's a link right there that says administrative regulations. And you can see them all laid out. All the administrative regulations are right there, readily accessible to review at your own leisure.
Ms. Osecki?
So I think, unfortunately, Mr. Hagee couldn't be here tonight, but I think this came up because we do get quite a few emails from parents. I think it sounds like he might get more than the rest of us, but I know myself, I get emails from parents about books sometimes. So I'm wondering, like Dr. Sanko, if you could speak to how many book challenges we have, do all of those books we get emails about, do they end up in book challenges or?
Yes, so as Al said, this AR was put in place before administration got here. And I originally thought after 4 years, we had 3 or 4 challenges, and then Nicole and Al reminded me that we had one challenge that resulted in essentially a draw. I think it was 4-4-1, somebody abstained from voting, and that same book was re-challenged. So one of those discussions Al ran point on, and then the second one Nicole ran point on for the same book. And then we had a second challenge, and that book was at the secondary level, and then the second book was at the elementary level. So we've had, they're both secondary, thank you. So we've had 3 total with 2 books.
In the time that you've been superintendent?
Yes.
Or, so 3 and 4 years.
Did you have a question? Yeah. Ms. Polly?
So I remember when Sue Elliott was the assistant superintendent, there was a challenge like that. I don't remember which book, but I remember that this whole thing happened, this whole process, and the decision was to remove the book from the library. And that never came to the board. That was part of this, administrative process. I also remember when, before you guys started, there was a discussion about some books that were going to be used like for teaching. And the one that comes into my mind was The Giver. And there were some board members that did not like the book. They spoke against it, but there was no further move on that. The book was included. I think the administration was supportive of the book, and the book stayed as, I think they use it for teaching, right? It's English. It's not just a library book, it was a curriculum book. Yeah. So, I mean, in the last few years, I've seen this process happening. And I have to say that, whatever is described here seems to have worked one way or the other, because there were, one time the book was removed, other times maybe they were not removed, so.
So going back to what you said, prior to our administration being here, there was a challenge. The committee that reviewed that challenge, if I recall correctly, and again, this predates us, so help my memory, the committee recommended to keep the book on the shelf, and the substitute or acting superintendent at the time issued a memo, an email stating to take the book off the shelf.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And then the 2 times that we've had results, I have sent the committee findings to the board and asked the board for direction. This is what the committee has recommended. And in both examples, the board upheld what the committee had voted in each of those challenges.
Thank you.
Mr. Tate?
I just want to make sure I heard correctly, please, Dr. Sanko. You said prior to you becoming superintendent, and I remember this discussion, the committee voted to keep the book on the library shelves, and the superintendent felt it should come off. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And are you 5 years now?
I'm sorry?
Are you superintendent?
No, he's not 5.
Four.
Not 5 years.
4.
He's 3.
4.
3
4
plus.
years.
3 plus.
Yeah, and last thing I want to say is, after all that discussion about The Giver,
Yeah.
a few days, I don't know, sometime later, I was in one of my adult kids' rooms at home and found on the bookshelf The Giver, and I thought, I have to read this.
Yeah.
And
It's a good
my
book.
point is, I highly recommend The Giver. It's pretty classic. Oh, and a colleague of mine said that was her favorite book in high school. And it's the first book that really got her excited, so it's worth reading.
Okay, I wasn't expecting a book review today. Mr. Roosevelt?
Just for clarification, in this instance, what was the result? The committee recommended keeping the book, and the superintendent or acting superintendent recommend removing the book. What was the result? Is it
I
on the
don't-
shelf or did it come off the shelf?
Oh, the results is that that book came off the shelf at that time. I don't know what the committee results were. Like, I don't know if it was 9-0, 7-2, I don't know that.
Right, and that wasn't a board vote.
That was not a board vote.
That was a superintendent or acting superintendent decision. The other folks, Ms. Stone, you mentioned a bunch of resources that make recommendations for books. And somebody else may know this, so I'm not trying to just highlight it, but you listed it. I'm trying to be reminded on the age grade or the age band of young adults that many of those resources refer to. What was the age of a young adult in these book or these library book recommendations? Okay. It's under 18 though, isn't it?
Young adult.
Specific association with their age designation.
Yeah,
I think it varies.
It might vary, and that would be interesting if it does vary. I imagine it does. But what is the varying bands, the outer limits?
I know when I take my kids to the library, so usually Richboro, but any library, they have a section for young adult and they have a section for juvenile.
Right.
And they're different.
Right.
You know, one is more appropriate for my kids who are,
Right.
7, 10. One is, I would say they're not appropriate yet.
Yeah. That's what I just would think might be helpful in this discussion, is to understand what those bands are and where they may or may not fall in our libraries.
So I would imagine that when they go through the challenges, the librarian works with everyone on where that sits, age appropriate, which is great to hear this process tonight. And I think the community needs to hear this, that this is the process we have, and this is what we do with our library books. They are age appropriate. They are in challenges, or you can go in, there's houses selections done. Everything is public for you to see. There's no book banning in this district. We don't intend to do that. It is not happening. We have a great policies here that are done by administrative, and they do a great job. We have great librarians who do a great job with and the teachers. So this is great to see. I appreciate we're going over this.
Any other questions? With that, then we can move to public comment. So I see we have a lot of members. Okay. You didn't have, did you have another slide, Ron?
No.
You didn't have any questions? Okay. Ms. Khan, did you have any questions before we move on? Or comments?
I'm okay, thank you.
Okay.
And if I could just add at the end, if anyone who hasn't signed in, it's really an attendance sign in. If anyone who hasn't signed in, if they could just sign in at the end of the meeting, that'd be great, just so we can inform them.
Well, I can't, she could remember with one.
Well, I can just move down the line from, before you speak, what we'll do is, it's the same process we do at the board meeting, so that you have, 3 minutes to make comments. We don't necessarily respond, because otherwise, we want to hear what you have to say. But we try to keep it to 3 minutes, and again, remember, we'll start at this end. Yes, I know you were here. And just remember again that we are recording this, so that you would make sure it's appropriate for anyone that may be listening. Thank you. Just give us your name and what township you're in.
Anthony Augusta, Northampton. So I have 2 handouts that will help with what I'm discussing. First is just the bullet points of my 3 minutes. And the second is ancillary material from a book challenge and resulting emails thereafter.
I just went that way, sorry.
Good evening, members of the Policy Committee and Board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My comments tonight relate directly to district policy, specifically how we approach library curation, book challenges, and the transparency of those decisions under the Sunshine Act of Pennsylvania. A few years ago, I challenged the inclusion of The Princess in Black and The Prince in Pink in our elementary library. My concern was not about ideology, but about age appropriateness. What messages we are endorsing for children who are just learning to read. That challenge was denied, and when I requested to review the committee's meeting minutes, I was told no such meeting minutes exist, and that the meeting was not subject to the Sunshine Act. That response should concern everyone listening. The Pennsylvania Sunshine Act was created so that the citizens could observe the deliberation and decision-making of public agencies, not simply their outcomes. When a committee meets to evaluate and recommend whether a book remains in our children's libraries, that's a deliberation of agency business. Transparency in that process is not optional, it's a matter of public trust. When decisions about library materials are made behind closed doors, the issue is no longer about books, it's about governance. We cannot claim to serve students' best interests while excluding parents and community members from understanding how those decisions are made. That brings me to the second point. Curation is not censorship. Every school library operates within limits, limited shelf space, limited budgets, and an obligation to ensure educational value and age-appropriate content. Setting thoughtful, transparent criteria for what belongs in a K-12 library is not about banning books, it's about stewardship. The same kind of discernment that guides curriculum standards or the selection of instructional materials. Our children are a captive audience, compelled by the law to attend school. That responsibility demands a higher standard of judgment and transparency, not a lower one. I urge this board to do two things. First, ensure that all meetings of the Reconsideration Committee are conducted in accordance with the Sunshine Act and that minutes are made available to the public. Second, establish a clear and consistent framework for library curation, one that respects intellectual freedom while honoring parents' rights to expect age-appropriate content in the classroom. Transparency and thoughtful curation are not opposing values, they are a foundation of public education worthy of our trust.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And, yes.
Hi, my name is Fran. I'm a Newtown Township resident and a concerned grandparent. And concerning the book challenges, I have gone onto the website wokepa.com, and I implore everyone, every parent listening to this, to go onto wokepa.com. Choose Mid-Atlantic, Pennsylvania, choose Council Rock School District. You can see what books are in what schools and read excerpts and make your decision. Do you want your children reading this? Okay, I'm old. I thought this was inappropriate for every level of education in Council Rock. Collegiate level, perhaps, but not from K to 12. The middle schools, the elementary, secondary, there's a lot in the secondary schools that I thought was very inappropriate. Drug and alcohol abuse, talking about suicide like it's nothing, and the sexualization. These are your children, and they are a captive audience. If it is in the school library, that means that these ideas are condoned by the school, and I object to it.
Thank you. Next.
Lori from Northampton Township.
Okay.
Mine's kind of all over. Okay. I wanted to find out who decides, let's see if I can remember. Okay, in policy 232, I would like to have examples of students participating in the governance of school activities. I'd like to know what kind of activities we're talking about. And it says at levels appropriate to their ages and competencies, and I want to know who determines that. I'd also like to find out from the board if the Pledge of Allegiance is said before class starts. I know that when I was growing up it was. I know that in the beginning of my kids' education here at the elementary school level, I think I recall that happening. I'd like to know if that's happening, and I also want to mention that it's to the republic for which we stand. We're a constitutional republic. I don't understand why there's all this democracy talk in here and in these policies. It just keeps bubbling up. This is the teachers and parents and administration working together. It's not the inmates running the asylum. So the students should have contributions. We have student government. I'm just wanting to make sure that we have, guide rails on what we're educating our kids with. We're in a school, I thought, reading, writing, arithmetic, science, and so on. I just, a little confused about that. I'd like to find out if there are plans for maybe a rating system, because I remember somebody used to come here and read some of the explicit materials that are in our libraries, and I'm not sure, what's particularly appropriate. I remember there was a very explicit sexual material, so is that something that's age appropriate for 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds? I'm just not really sure, and I would really like an opt-in versus an opt-out for a section in the library that contains materials that might be considered questionable. I'd still like a definition. I know that I've written the board a couple times. I know I'm not supposed to look at you unless you're the chair. Are you the chair? Oh, I'm supposed to look at you, okay. The banning definition, I've asked a couple times in emails and I've gotten crickets on that. I would like a clear definition if we're gonna, especially if we're gonna be using this, during the upcoming political stuff going on, mudslinging and such. Let's see, what else? I want to find out also, I know I wrote it somewhere on this sheet.
We're at 3 minutes, so.
Okay, well, it's all right. I wanted to find out how you're choosing who is on the committee. The parents, for example, I wanted to know the criteria for the parents or the students who are going to be on this committee of deciding who if there's a question, challenges or something. I'd like to find out how those people are selected.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Diane from Newtown. My kids are all graduated, thank God. So, it's very interesting about these vehicles coming in, the electric ones. I know somebody's garage that caught on fire, and then a day later, the fire was still going, and he unfortunately tried to put it out, and he died. So we're not allowing for these students to come in and plug in, right, into the school, right? Okay, so kids they want to own some of their growing up time, right? So, okay, bikes and scooters and some of these side-by-sides, I don't think any of the ATVs are street legal, but some of these side-by-sides are street legal. So, and the scooters, but I can't imagine driving from, up in Wrightstown, where I'm from down to Council Rock School District North, and it'd be cool with the parents or the school, right? But if they're within a mile distance, is there a radius that's provided? If you live within a radius of, I don't know, you would have to determine what that safety factor becomes, because you don't want to cross over 413 coming, from Buck Road or coming from whatever that other road is that the middle school's on, right? So is there a radius that, and are they, would you let them? Because, maybe something inside of me says, it's okay. I mean, to give them a little bit of freedom, but not ever that much just yet, right? So I just find that very interesting that we've kind of broached this area, this topic with electric vehicles. And of course, you're going to find out if they're registered and insured and all that. Okay, good. So, who is assessing through the reasonable, okay, yeah, so here we are, right? We're talking about all the drug stuff and the search and all of this. Is there a school resource officer situated in each school, especially the high school or the middle schools? They might look like they carry a gun, I don't know, it might be a tase gun, but it might be still enough to create enough of a barrier of wrong and right that they would err on the side of right and not trouble themselves with someone who is presenting as authority with a uniform, right? So is there somebody that's situated that would kind of be the guardrail, all right? So you can call it whatever. But we're talking about all these drugs. What about bullying? Are we talking about bullying? Is there a lot of bullying going on in schools? And we're putting so much time into, the vehicles and, the drugs, but what about the bullying? The bullying online, the bullying in school, the bullying on the bus, the sex on the bus, the blowjobs on the bus. I mean, we're all aware of all of this. I'm sorry, but it's happening. It was happening when my kids were in school. Like, is anybody monitoring that? Like, that should be something to be discussed. I'm sorry, I'm a little embarrassed by even saying that. But it's something somebody should be talking about, or at least monitoring.
3 minutes.
And I think that's probably a good front of it. And I think the next girl is going to talk about the books.
Well, before I get into that, this is my first meeting.
And can you just tell us your name?
Oh, sorry, I'm Diana. And I'm from Northampton. My child's in Holland.
Okay.
So this is my first meeting. My child is in first grade, so I'm just trying to get my bearings into how this is all works. Do we ask a question and you can give us an answer? Do we ask a question and just kind of find a way somewhere? Someone responds to us, who do we contact, or how does this all work? No, any answers?
Yeah, the answer at the end.
Oh, okay. But as far as the books, I wanted to know, who decides the teaching books for the curriculums of the kids? And how can we get a list of that and can we go over it?
Is that all you wanted to say? Okay. And
Hi, my name is Roshi. I'm from Northampton Township. I wasn't supposed to speak today. I'm just giving somebody a ride.
okay.
But my 3 of my kids went through here. I'm a legal immigrant, fresh off the boat. And so this is very new to me. But looking at California, it's scaring me. So I feel like I need to know what my grandkids will be taught. So I feel like when my kids were growing up, I didn't have the time. So I feel like I am going to put the time in so my grandkids get the right direction in life, because it seems like right now we feel like lost. So, I mean, I've been here 30 plus years and it's a different America now completely, so I feel like we need to be like partners in making this education, public education, which is the best in the world. I've been everywhere, Europe, Africa, I come from Africa. So I appreciate this country and I want it to go in the way it has been going over these years. And we need to stop fighting and work for our kids together. That's it.
Okay. Because I can't answer each individual question, and we don't usually respond in that way, but there's a couple of things that are very easy. We have, parents have the ability to go online and see exactly what their student is being taught in their classroom. I don't remember, what is this called now? The program that Ms. Gary is? Atlas. So it does define, and then of course you can always speak to the teacher regarding the curriculum. Our books for curriculum are vetted by administration and the teachers. They pilot the books in the classrooms, and we rely on our educators to make the decisions on curriculum. As far as SROs, we have one at every
Secondary school.
School
and high school, and we have one for the elementary schools. Or, no, the secondary schools, correct.
And then we have our Council Rock staff.
Yep, and we also have our Council Rock security, but every second, middle school and high school has an SRO, which is a
They can't hear you.
I'm sorry, every secondary school, at each middle school and each high school has a school resource officer, which is a police officer who is.
Elementary schools excluded?
The elementary school, we don't, but we have our own Council Rock security staff who monitor the elementary schools.
Are they armed?
No, we do not have armed security.
Is there a reason why we don't have armed security in elementary?
Not something that we're discussing right now. I'm not gonna have a debate over
No, that's fine,
that.
but who would I?
So,
Who would I go to find my answers?
You go to the administration.
You can go to your principal or Mr. Senko.
It's me.
As far as bullying, we have strong policies on bullying, on substance abuse. And those are all available for everyone. As far as guidelines on the books, again, the policy 109.5 and 6 define how library books are selected and who's on those committees, and then how to make an objection. That's all. You'd have to read all the details. And also how to object to a book, or how to put guide rail or limits on your child's availability of books for your child. So that's all there.
Mr.
And
Stone,
I
if
think
I
that's
could,
it.
if I could.
Yes.
So thank you for doing that, because usually in public comment, the board doesn't actually have a conversation during the meetings, but obviously the chair can do that, so she did a great job of touching upon one of your concerns. One thing is also the buses have cameras, so there's a camera on every bus, and you're increasing security there. But as far as being new and asking your questions, if it has to do with your class, you go to the teacher, then you go to the principal, and then you can escalate up to the secondary or directors. And then also Dr. Senko is very, very good at talking with anybody. She's a wonderful person.
Do you know the process of it?
Oh.
How does it work?
Like as far as if it's in the school, they try, instead of going to the superintendent or a board director, you try to communicate with the teacher first if it's that specific to that thing. And as far as picking books, every year around in the summer, I think, they leave the books out so you can take a look at them for the next year. And so you have a whole month that all the books that we are going to vote on that month will be in this office, in this building for the public to see.
I also encourage people to come to any of the committee meetings that are open to the public, again, like you've done tonight, so you can hear what we're discussing and what decisions we're looking to make and so on. There's an education committee, policy committee, facilities, and as well as finance. All these meetings are posted, their agendas are posted, so you can see, join us, okay?
I have one comment, I just want to, excuse me, just asking. Could you just state, I believe the Pledge of Allegiance is said at all the schools, and they have morning meetings, so could you just answer that, please?
I'm sorry, we broke some.
Can you confirm that at all the schools that the Pledge of Allegiance is said, and that the elementary school will be a morning meeting?
Right, thank you. So, yes, any other questions or comments? Mr.
I have
Tate?
one tiny suggestion.
Okay,
If you go to our website, under parents, there's a button for how to contact CR, and there's a wonderful diagram that explains how you should start with your teacher. And then if you can't resolve that, you go to the school principal, and if you can't resolve that, you move on.
That's on the
So
CRSD website?
It's on the CRSD, under parents, how to contact Council Rock.
I think it also comes out, for the principals send it out, because I have elementary kids also, the principals send that chart out in their monthly emails, or at least at the beginning of the year they do.
The weekly.
Yeah, and the weekly, yeah.
I just wanted to ask again, am I gonna get a definition for that expanding?
We have no definition, so
I
you
move to
define,
adjourn.
but we're really adjourning the meeting because we've heard from everyone. I thank you all for coming. And,
Part of the problem is that I didn't get any questions answered, and I sat here through this entire meeting. The only question that I got was exactly what I'd like to know how the members are chosen on that.
but we're adjourning the
Why
meeting.
don't you guys have conversations with the public? I don't understand this.
And I thank everyone for coming tonight.